There are nights when the world feels ordinary, and then there are nights when it feels as if something ancient is listening beneath the floorboards, patient and quiet, like a distant drum heard through stone. Before we let ourselves drift along the slow river of the past, if you find a little peace here, please gently tap like and subscribe, so we can meet again in the next soft dream of history and myth. For now, just settle the weight of your body where it belongs. Let your shoulders drop by the smallest degree. Let your jaw unclench, as if you are setting down a thought you have been holding all day. The air in your room has its own temperature, neither hot nor cold. Simply present. Perhaps there is a faint scent of fabric, of clean cotton, of wood, of something warm that belongs only tonight. Outside, the wind may brush a window or a roof, and if it does, you do not have to interpret it. You can let it be what it is, the way the ancients once let the world be mysterious without needing to fix it. Because in ancient Greece, around the time the earliest poets began to shape the old stories into song, somewhere near the 8th or 7th century BCE, people lived with a kind of gentle vigilance, not panic, not constant fear, but the quiet understanding that the earth was alive, and that the sea had moods, and that the sky could turn without warning. A day could begin in clear light and end in thunder. A hillside could feel steady for years and then, one night, tremble as if it had dreamt a heavy dream. And when people looked for explanations, they did not always reach for numbers or diagrams. They reached for names. They gave the unknown a face, a family, a voice, so that it could be spoken to, sung about, carried in the mind like a lantern. High above them, they imagined Olympus, bright with marble and cloud, a place of order. But beneath that order, the stories insist, there was always a pressure, a deep, older pressure, like heat under volcanic rock, and from that pressure, from the oldest layers of the cosmos, a figure rises in the imagination of Greece like a storm taking shape. Typhon. Say the name slowly, and you can almost hear the breath of wind inside it. Typhon is not a monster you meet on a road, not a beast you can chase away with a spear. Typhon is the scale of weather, the size of mountains. The feeling of the world when it remembers it is stronger than any throne. The old sources describe him in ways that do not fit neatly into the language of animals. He is too large for ordinary comparison. So the poets reach for the sky itself. They say his head brushed the stars. They say his arms could stretch from east to west. They say his eyes glowed, not with simple anger, but with fire like the mouth of a furnace seen through darkness. And then, as if the upper body were not enough, the lower part of him becomes a moving forest of serpents. Not a single tail, but many coils, many living strands, each one alive with its own breath, each one hissing like rain on hot stone. If you imagine it gently, without forcing the image, you can sense the strange rhythm of it, a vast being whose voice is not one voice. Typhon speaks. The myths say, in many mouths, many sounds, sometimes like a man, sometimes like a bull, sometimes like a lion, and sometimes like thunder itself. It is as if the world's loudest elements have been gathered into one body and given permission to speak at once. But monsters in Greek myth rarely appear without a reason. The reason is almost always a family. Because the Greeks, with their patient habit of explanation, built genealogies for everything. The earth is not just earth. It is Gaia, a mother, old and enduring. The chasm beneath the world is not just a hole. It is Tartarus, an endless depth, a place and a presence. And when the Olympians, led by Zeus, overthrew the Titans and set a new order, Gaia did not simply accept it as a political change. In the old imagination, she felt it like a wound. She had given birth to the Titans, and now those children were imprisoned. You can picture Gaia not as a woman with a face, but as the ground underfoot, as soil that holds roots, as rock that holds water, as the smell of earth after rain. Irritation, in that sense, is not a tantrum. It is a slow pressure. It is the way tectonic plates push without hurry. And from that pressure, from Gaia's anger and Tartarus's depth, the story says Typhon was born, late into the cosmic drama, like a final argument too large to ignore. Now picture Olympus in the moment before he rises. A feast, perhaps, in the mythic way. Tables heavy with brightness, cups of ambrosia, the casual confidence of gods who believe they have already won. Zeus sits among them, a king still warm from victory over the Titans. The air is clear. The clouds are decorative. The world feels arranged. And then the horizon darkens. Not like sunset. Not like a harmless shadow. But like a presence moving toward them. The sky itself feels crowded. The air changes. There is a taste of metal, of coming lightning. The birds stop. The stories say that when Typhon appeared, most of the Olympians fled. They did not simply walk away. They transformed, the way gods can, into animals, into forms of quick escape. They ran toward Egypt. The myths later suggest, and in that strange detail, you can hear the echo of cultural blending, of Greeks encountering Egyptian images and recognizing their own gods in new masks. It is almost tender, in a way that even divine beings would choose disguise, would choose distance, would choose safety when faced with the raw shape of chaos. Yet Zeus, at least at first, does not run. He meets Typhon. The battle is described as weather fighting weather, lightning against storm, fire against wind, mountains shaking like bowls struck by a slow hand. In some tellings, and this is the part that always surprises the listener who expects gods to be invincible, Zeus does not win immediately. Typhon overpowers him in the first round. There is a moment of helplessness. The king of order suddenly made fragile. Typhon tears the sinews from Zeus's hands and feet. Imagine the odd, quiet horror of that not blood in a human sense, but the removal of strength itself, the disassembly of divine control. Zeus is imprisoned in a cave. A guardian is set, a creature named Delphine in some accounts, serpentine and watchful. If you think about it, this is not only drama. It is a metaphor the Greeks would understand with their bodies. The sudden loss of power, the way storms can strip a home of its roof, The way the sea can remove a ship's ability to move. The way nature can, without malice, make even the strongest feel unmade. And then, as the story continues in its patient rhythm, help arrives. Hermes, the swift messenger, and Pan, the wild god of goat-hoofed music and sudden laughter, become unlikely rescuers. They retrieve Zeus's sinews, restore him. The king of gods regains his movement, his grasp, his ability to hold the world together. There is something almost soothing in that idea that even after disassembly, there can be reassembly. Even after chaos, there can be order again, though perhaps a little wiser, a little more respectful of what lies beneath. The final confrontation, many later poets say, happens in Sicily, at Mount Etna, a place of real fire and real tremors. If you have ever imagined a volcano, you know the feeling it gives. Not only heat, but a kind of solemn weight. The mountain looks still, but it is not still. It is a lid over something restless. The Greeks used this landscape as a body for their myth. Zeus throws his thunderbolts. Typhon falls. He is buried under the mountain. And then comes the quiet after the battle. The most important part for a story meant to last. Because the Greeks do not say Typhon is gone. They say he is sleeping under Etna, under layers of rock and molten pressure. He shifts, sometimes, and when the earth trembles, when lava creeps out like glowing breath, they say it is Typhon's body, reminding the world that chaos is not destroyed, only contained. It is a very human way to make peace with the unpredictable, to say, yes, the ground can shake, but it is not meaningless. It is the movement of an old being in its sleep, to say, yes, fire can come from a mountain, but it is not random. It is the breath of a buried storm. And if you let that thought soften in you, it becomes almost comforting, not because danger is pleasant, but because the mind relaxes when it can place things somewhere. The Greeks placed their fear beneath a mountain. They gave it a name. They gave it a story. And in doing so, they made it smaller than the universe, even if it was still enormous. Now, in the slow drift of our telling, we begin to follow the story down, not with haste, but with a gentle descent, because Typhon, the myths say, is not alone in his legacy. He is paired, in the strange logic of mythic families, with a figure quieter but just as foundational, a mother not of earthquakes alone, but of all the teeth and wings that haunt the edges of Greek imagination. Her name is Echidna, and the path to her is not a road, not a bridge, not a staircase. It is a feeling, like walking from sunlight into shade. It is the moment your attention shifts from the sky to the ground, from thunder to silence, from the loud spectacle of battle to the soft drip of water in a cave. So let the image of Etna remain behind you, distant and steady. Let the last echo of thunder fade into the deep background of the mind. And if your eyelids feel a little heavier now, you do not have to fight that. You can simply let them rest more naturally, as if night itself has placed a warm hand on them. We are going down into the older places now, where stories are born in darkness, and where the mother waits, calm and unhurried, in a cave that has no calendar, only stone and time. The descent into the underworld of myth is never a sudden drop. It is more like fog thickening around a path. At first, you still know where you are. You still remember the shape of your room, the familiar weight of your blanket, the quiet architecture of your own night. And then, gradually, the mind opens another door, one that does not creak, one that simply yields. And beyond it, there is a different kind of silence. In the imagination of ancient Greece, caves were not only holes in rock, they were thresholds. They were mouths of the earth, breathing out cool air that smelled of minerals and wet stone. If you have ever stood near a cave entrance, you know that scent dampness. Yes, but also something older than rain, something like the memory of mountains. A cave keeps its own temperature. It ignores the weather. It does not care whether the sun is bright. It remains steady, patient, dim. Somewhere in that steady dimness, the stories place Echidna, not in a temple, not under a banner, not in a city where people bargain and laugh and count coins. No, she is far away from the polished life of the polis, far from the columns and the olive markets, far from the tidy human wish that everything should be understandable. Echidna belongs to the borderlands, to the places where the wilderness begins to speak in its own language. The poets are careful when they describe her, as if they are handling a delicate object that might bite. They say she is half woman, half serpent. The upper half is beautiful, calm, strangely composed, not smiling, not frowning, simply present. The lower half is a coiling tail, thick and powerful, covered in scales that catch what little light exists and return it like a dim sheen. If you imagine her in the cave, you can picture the way the air clings to the stone, the way water collects in thin lines along the walls, the way shadows pool in corners. Echidna's tail lies in those shadows like a river of night, and her human face is the part you can see most clearly, as if the cave itself chooses what to reveal. She is not loud. She does not charge forward. She does not need to. Echidna is the kind of presence that does not ask permission. In the ancient mind, she represents fertility that is not domesticated, not the gentle fertility of a garden row, but the wild fertility of the forest, where life and danger grow from the same soil. She is the idea that the world, left alone, will create beings that do not fit human comfort. Beings that survive because they are sharp, watchful, and perfectly adapted to darkness. And in the genealogies of myth, Echidna and Typhon become a pair not because it is romantic, but because it is explanatory. Chaos and fertility together produce a lineage of monsters. The Greeks, with their love of catalogs, name them as if reciting a family tree in the flicker of firelight: the Hydra, the Chimera, the Nemean lion, the Sphinx, and the most faithful guardian of the dead, Cerberus. Cerberus. Even the name feels like a low growl in the throat, but we can approach him gently, because in Greek thought, he is not evil. He is not a villain chasing you through streets. He is a boundary with fur and teeth. He is the gate-made animal. To understand Cerberus, imagine first the underworld as the Greeks imagined it. not the blazing inferno of later traditions, not a place of constant screams, but a realm of dimness and routine, a land where the colors are muted, where the air feels still, where the sound of footsteps seems softer, as if the ground absorbs them. The underworld is the place where stories become quiet. It is not always punishment. For most, it is simply the continuation of existence without sunlight, a meadow of asphodel, pale and endless, where the dead drift like leaves that have forgotten the tree they fell from. The journey there begins at the moment of death, when the psyche, the soul, loosens from the body like a thread slipping from cloth. Hermes, the guide, brings the soul to the banks of a river. Sometimes it is called the Styx, sometimes another river of the underworld. But in every version, it is a border. Water moving slowly, dark and reflective, like ink diluted in night. On the bank stands Charon, the ferryman, not grand, not dramatic, simply doing his work. A boat, a pole, a face lined with the patience of repetition. This is why the living, an ancient Greek burial custom, placed a coin with the dead, a small payment, a practical gesture in a universe where even after death you needed to be prepared. Imagine that ritual for a moment, a quiet room, family members washing the body, oiling the skin, arranging hair, speaking softly, the scent of olive oil, the faint smoke of incense, the hush of mourning that is not loud but deep. Then the coin, cool metal placed under the tongue or on the eyes, as if saying, "We cannot follow you, but we will not send you empty-handed." The boat crosses. The shore on the other side is not welcoming, not hostile, simply other. And there, at the entrance to Hades' realm, stands Cerberus. He is described in many ways. The most familiar is 3 heads, each with its own mouth, its own set of teeth, its own breathing. Some poets exaggerate and give him many more heads, but 3 is enough for the mind, because 3 suggests completeness, a kind of triple vigilance. Imagine his bodies, heavy and muscular like a great hound, but altered by myth into something more, a mane that might be snakes, shifting slightly as if alive, a tail that might be serpentine, not wagging in joy, but moving with a slow, steady awareness. His eyes are not necessarily red or flaming in the Greek imagination. Sometimes they are simply bright in the dark, like lanterns catching light. But here is the gentle truth. The myths keep returning to Cerberus does not roam. He does not hunt the living. He does not break out to terrorize villages. He stays at his post. His duty is simple: keep the dead in. Keep the living out. In a world that feared disorder more than death itself, Cerberus is a comfort. He is the rule that holds. He is the lock on the door. If you imagine him lying at the gate, you can soften the image. 3 heads resting on stone, breath rising and falling in a rhythm that is oddly steady, like a large animal asleep near a hearth. Perhaps the air around him smells of old stone and river water. Perhaps there is a faint metallic scent from the coin offerings and the damp ground. The underworld does not smell of fire. It smells of earth, of distance, of time without daylight. And yet, heroes do approach him, because heroes in Greek stories have a habit of stepping where they should not. They do not always fight Cerberus. Often they persuade him, or soothe him, or distract him. That detail matters, because it tells you what kind of creature he is. Not a mindless beast, a guardian who can be approached with gentleness. Orpheus, the musician, is the softest example. Picture him standing before the gate, not holding a sword, but holding a lyre. He plays, and the sound is not loud. It is delicate, a string vibrating in the dark like a small star. The melody travels through the cavern air. Touches stone, touch fur, touches the alertness in Cerberus's 3 faces. And the great hound, who spends eternity listening for disturbances, hears instead something that belongs to grief and love. The myths say Cerberus lies down, lulled by music. If you listen to that image, it becomes almost tender. Even the guardian of death can rest when a human sings honestly. Then there is Psyche, the mortal woman wandering through divine tasks. In some versions, to pass Cerberus, she brings honeycakes, not weapons, not threats, but sweetness. She tosses one cake, and one head takes it. Another cake, another head. The third, a simple exchange, an offering. It suggests that even at the edge of the underworld, kindness has a place, that boundaries can be respected through ritual rather than violence. And then there is Heracles, the strongest hero, whose labors feel like a list of impossible chores assigned by fate itself. One of his tasks is to bring Cerberus to the surface, not to kill him, not to harm him, but to show him, to prove he can touch the boundary and return. Imagine the scene in slow motion, not as struggle, but as heavy effort. Heracles stepping into the dim gate, muscles tense, breath visible in the cold air. Cerberus rising, 3 heads lifting, 3 throats rumbling like distant drums. The hero does not strike with a sword. He wrestles, arms around the beasts' necks, using strength but also restraint, because he must bring Cerberus back alive. When Cerberus is pulled into daylight, the myths say he reacts as any creature of darkness would. He squints. He shakes his head. He does not like the brightness. The sun is too sharp, too revealing, and perhaps that is why the moment feels quiet rather than triumphant. Because the underworld is not meant for daylight, Cerberus is not meant for applause. He is returned, and the gate is closed again, and order resumes. There is another gentle detail that survives in language. Some scholars suggest the name Cerberus may be linked to an older root meaning spotted. If that is true, then the monstrous guardian of the dead might, in the simplest translation, be called something like Spot. It is almost amusing, but also calming, because it reminds you that fear and familiarity are often close. A terrifying figure can still carry an ordinary name. A boundary can be guarded by something that, in another life, might have been simply a dog by a door. And in ancient burial practice, the idea of offering sweetness to Cerberus appears again. Honey cakes buried with the dead, not for the ferryman, but for the hound. A small gesture, a soft bribe, a way to ensure that even in the dark passage, there is something gentle waiting. Imagine the honey itself, thick and amber, smelling faintly of flowers that grew under Mediterranean sun. That smell, carried into the underworld by ritual, feels like a little piece of the living world set down carefully for the journey. So Cerberus becomes less a nightmare and more a quiet necessity. He is the reason the dead remain where they belong. He is the guard who holds the hush intact. He is not the one who causes suffering. He is the one who keeps the boundaries stable so that the world above does not blur into the world below. And when you think of him like that, the image can settle into your mind as something steady. 3 heads resting, stone cool under fur, breath slow, the gate behind him firm and silent. No need to run, no need to fight. You are not trespassing. You are only listening, only drifting through story. Echidna remains in her cave, the mother in shadow, and Cerberus remains at his post, the guardian in duty. Between them, the Greeks placed their understanding of fear not as random terror, but as a system, a map of the wild, a way to explain why certain places felt dangerous, why certain thresholds felt heavy, why the idea of crossing from life to death needed a keeper. Let that be enough for now. Let the underworld remain distant, like a landscape seen through mist. Let Cerberus lie down again, not in defeat, but in calm. And if your breathing has grown slower while you listened, that is natural. If your thoughts have begun to blur at the edges, that is also natural. The gate is closed. The boundary holds. The night is quiet. And beyond this gate, somewhere far above the riverbanks and the stone, there is another landscape waiting in the next part of the journey. A wetland where mist clings to reeds, where water stands still as if listening, where a problem can grow 2 new faces when you try to cut it away. But we will not rush there. We will arrive the way sleep arrives, slowly, gently, without forcing anything. The journey drifts onward, gently, the way a slow river carries fallen leaves without any hurry to reach the sea. After the stone gate of the underworld, after the quiet dignity of the guardian hound, the world loosens into something softer and wetter. A lowland where earth and water speak in murmurs. In ancient Greece, there were places people avoided, not because a law forbade them, but because the air itself seemed to advise caution. Lerna was such a place, a stretch of marshland in Argolis, not far from the proud roads and hard walls of Argos, yet somehow set apart, as if the land there had learned a different rhythm. Imagine it now, and let it come slowly. The ground becomes darker underfoot, less like a road and more like memory. The soil is damp and yielding, scented with wet clay and decaying leaves, with the faint sharpness of brackish water and the softer sweetness of crushed reeds. A thin film of moisture clings to stones. Insects hover in small, patient clouds, and now and then a dragonfly passes, its wings catching a brief flicker of light. Frogs call in measured intervals, never panicked, only persistent, as if they have been reciting the same small hymn since the first dawn. Above, the sky is pale, softened by haze, and the sunlight, when it reaches the marsh, is filtered into something quieter, something that does not demand attention, The Greeks did not think of swamps as simple scenery. In their imagination, certain landscapes were thresholds, places where the line between this world and the next grew thin, places where the underworld could lean upward and breathe. Lerna, in some old traditions, was linked to hidden descents, to entrances below, to secret passages where water might slide down into darkness and return again. Colder, tasting of stone, you can understand why. A marsh can swallow a footstep. It can hide a body. It can keep secrets without effort. A calm surface can look like safety while holding depths that do not care whether you are ready. And so it is in this dim, wet place that the storytellers placed one of their most persistent fears. Given shape and scales and too many watching eyes, the Hydra of Lerna is often introduced with a sharp phrase, as if the tale were meant to startle. But tonight, we will not startle. We will approach her the way one approaches an old ruin at twilight, quietly, with respect for what has lasted. The Hydra was not merely a monster to be defeated. She was an idea the Greeks carried, quietly, in the back of the mind, that some troubles do not end when cut away, that some wounds reopen, that some anxieties multiply under pressure. They told her origin as they told so many origins. Through family, the world of myth is a web of births, union, and inheritances, as if everything in nature has a lineage, even fear. The Hydra was said to come from Echidna and Typhon, from the mother who dwelled in a hidden cave and the storm-born giant buried beneath a mountain. In that lineage there is already a pattern, wildness joining wildness, and the offspring scattered across the map like living questions. Hydra's home was Lerna, and her task, if we can call it that, was simply to exist there, coiled in wet shadow, letting the marsh belong to her. If you stand at the edge of the swamp, you might not see her at first. Reeds overlap and sway, making soft brushing sounds, like cloth moving in a slow dance. Water reflects sky in patches, then darkens in others where plants are thick. A small ripple moves outward from somewhere unseen, and you may think it is only a fish, only a frog. Yet the air itself feels slightly different, as though it carries a faint metallic tang, like stone warmed by sun and then cooled by evening. Some ancient poets said her breath was poisonous, and whether that is literal or symbolic, it fits the mood of the place, because swamps can hold rot, and rot can rise, and the nose can catch it before the eye finds its source. In most tellings, a hero eventually comes, because myths are the places where human courage rehearses itself. Heracles arrives with the weight of his own story already on his shoulders, a man both celebrated and burdened, sent to labor and to atone. The Greeks loved to place their heroes in landscapes that match the task: a lion in a dry valley, a boar in the cold hills, and here, a many-headed serpent in a marsh. It feels almost like a map drawn by meaning rather than by geography, as if each place is selected not for convenience but for what it suggests to the soul. Heracles does not arrive in a parade. He comes as someone on duty, traveling with practical steps, with the soft creak of leather and the faint clink of metal. The air around him is warm with summer, yet the swamp cools it, drawing heat down into water and mud. He pauses where the reeds begin, and he looks out, measuring what he cannot yet see. In the myths, he is strong beyond ordinary men. But strength is only one tool. The Hydra is the sort of problem that asks for patience, for attention, for the willingness to learn what does not work and to change the method without pride. Some versions say he tries to draw her out with fire, because in a damp place flame has a strange authority. A torch flares, and its light turns the water's surface into moving bronze. Smoke lifts and spreads, carrying the scent of resin. That clean, sharp scent that suggests a forest even here in the marsh. The reeds glow at their edges, not burning, only warming, and the warmth makes a faint crackle, the sound of tiny drying stems. Somewhere in the reeds there is movement, subtle at first, then more certain, as if something large has shifted its weight beneath the water. When the Hydra rises, do not imagine a sudden leap meant for spectacle. Imagine instead something ancient unfolding, like a long thought stretching awake. A thick coil breaks the surface, black, green, and slick, water sliding off in quiet sheets. Then a head lifts into the air, narrow and watchful, with eyes that do not blink in the way human eyes do. And then another head appears, and another, each on its own neck, each with a mouth that opens slightly as if tasting the breeze. The number varies in the old sources, and the exact count is less important than the feeling it creates too many points of attention, too many mouths, too many possibilities for harm. Each head is a small danger, and yet they are part of one intention. The Hydra does not need to rage to be frightening. She is frightening because she is steady. She lives here. She belongs here. The swamp is her chamber, and every reed seems like a curtain drawn for her privacy. Her many mouths open and close. Some hiss softly, and the hiss can be heard as wind moving through reeds, a sound the marsh already knows. The world is quiet except for the faint lapping of water and the distant calls of birds who have learned, over time, how to keep their distance without panic. Heracles steps forward into mud that grips his feet. It is not dramatic, only difficult in the way real ground can be difficult. Because real difficulty is often like this, heavy, slow, sticking to you. He lifts his club, and the first strike is a heavy sound, wood meeting scale, a dull thud that vibrates through the air and settles into the water as a small tremor. A head recoils, another snaps forward. He moves with a measured seriousness, using the space he has. In the old stories, heads are cut. The hero does what heroes do. Yet immediately, the Hydra shows her strange law where a head falls. New growth appears. This is the heart of the Hydra's meaning. You remove one problem, and two take its place. You solve one worry, and suddenly you have more. If you have ever lain awake with thoughts that multiply the more you try to silence them, you already understand Hydra's logic. The Greeks gave that logic teeth and scales so they could point to it and say, there it is, outside us, in the marsh. We can name it. We can tell a story about how to meet it. And in telling the story, perhaps we learn how to meet our own many-headed troubles. Because Heracles, for all his strength, learns quickly that repetition will not win. He needs a second motion, a closing of the wound. And so his companion, Iolaus, enters the tale, a nephew, an assistant, a quiet presence with a torch. It is an oddly gentle tool in a monster story, because fire here is not meant to blaze, only to seal. Each time a head is removed, Iolaus steps in, careful in the mud, and presses flame to the raw stump. The sound is small and sharp, a hiss like wet wood near a hearth. Steam rises. The air smells briefly of scorched flesh and swamp water, and then the smell fades again. Absorbed by the damp, the scene becomes almost methodical. Strike, remove, seal, strike, remove, seal. The swamp, which at first seemed like chaos, becomes a place of rhythm. Even monsters can be addressed with routine. The Greeks suggest, if you learn the rule and keep your hands steady, the Hydra shifts and coils. The water churns in low circles. Mud splashes in small, heavy drops that fall back with soft sounds. Never loud, never bright. The torchlight keeps moving, turning the reeds into thin gold lines, then letting them fall back into shadow. And yet the myth adds one more complication, as if the world itself resists neat endings. One head, they say, cannot be killed. The immortal head. There is always a part of the problem that does not yield to simple solutions. Heracles wrestles with it, and the struggle is heavy, slow, full of mud and breath. He cuts it away, and since it will not truly die, he buries it. A great stone is rolled over it, a boulder heavy enough to become a landmark. That is a very human solution, and therefore believable if you cannot remove a danger from the world. You may still contain it, weigh it down, make it sleep beneath stone. After the labor, the swamp is calmer, as though the reeds have exhaled. The water returns to its gentle surface. The frogs resume their measured calling. The insects return to their hovering patience. But Heracles does one more thing, and it is the sort of detail that makes Greek tales feel as if they are already setting the next act. He dips his arrows into the Hydra's blood. Poison becomes a resource. Victory carries forward into future sorrow. The Greeks knew that solutions can become seeds. What saves you today can harm you tomorrow. And the world does not always separate those outcomes cleanly. Now, let us step back from the hero and return to the place. Lerna at dusk. The torchlight fades as the sky deepens into blue-gray. The marsh cools. A faint mist rises. Not thick, only a veil that softens edges, making the reeds look like silhouettes cut from paper. The smell of wet earth grows stronger. Somewhere, an owl calls once and then falls silent. In the distance, the hills of Argolis are dark shapes, steady and indifferent. Nearer, the water holds the last pale color of the sky, and then slowly lets it go. In the old world, people lived close to water in a way we sometimes forget. A spring was not only a place to drink, it was a place to gather, to wash linen, to tell news, to notice seasons. Lerna was fed by springs, and some said one spring was bottomless, a mouth that swallowed whatever fell in and did not return it. Imagine a pot dropped by mistake, and then no splash you can hear, only silence, only the water resuming its calm as if nothing happened. Imagine how quickly such a thing becomes a story. The mind dislikes depth it cannot measure, and so it fills the depth with meaning. Near Argos, the land was old with worship. Hera, queen of the gods, was honored there in a great sanctuary, and people walked the roads between city and field with the steady habits of agriculture, sowing, reaping, pressing olives, tending vines. In such a life, the swamp is both neighbor and warning. It provides reeds for weaving, mud for certain crafts, water for animals, and yet it also invites illness, insects, fever, things that arrive quietly. A monster in the marsh is not a strange idea, when the marsh itself can make a person weak without any visible enemy. So the Hydra is not only a creature of fantasy, she is the swamp, speaking in mythic language. She is the fever, given a body, the hidden depth, given a face. To tell a story about Heracles defeating her is to tell a story about order holding a line against the wild, about fire and stone shaping water's uncertainty. It is a comfort. In a way, not a loud comfort, but a practical one. The world can be named. The world can be approached with tools. Even the regrowing problem can be slowed and sealed. And when the myth is over, the place remains. Lerna remains. Whether as marsh, as memory, or as a quiet word in a poem. If you ever stood there in the real world, you would not see a many-headed serpent rising to challenge you. You would see water plants, birds, insects, the slow work of decay and renewal. Yet the mind, remembering the old stories, might still sense the presence of something larger beneath the surface. Not dangerous, only ancient. The Greeks gave that feeling a name, and then they let it live beside the reeds, so they could pass the place with a little more understanding. For now, let the marsh fade behind you. Let the smell of wet earth soften into the background. Let the reed song become a distant hush. The path continues, and the night of myth is wide. There are other creatures shaped by the same strange parents. Other corners of the map where people once pointed and whispered. We will travel there slowly, with the same unbroken calm. From the marsh of Lerna, where water keeps its secrets under reeds and mist, our path turns toward drier hills, as if the world itself wishes to change the texture of its silence. The air becomes clearer. The scent of wet clay fades, replaced by warm stone and sun-baked herbs. Even so, the mood of the stories remains soft and unhurried. In Greek myth, monsters do not always live in darkness. Sometimes they live under bright skies, where the light is gentle and persistent, and the danger, if it exists, sits quietly in the background, like a thought you do not need to chase. Far to the east of the familiar plains of Argos and the clustered cities of Greece, the storytellers placed another child of that strange lineage, another creature born from Echidna and Typhon, or at least kin to them in spirit. They called her the Chimera. Her name itself feels like smoke in the mouth, soft and shifting. When people spoke it aloud, perhaps beside a hearth or under a courtyard vine, they could imagine a creature that should not be, a creature made from parts that do not belong together, as if nature had been gently rearranged in a dream. To meet the Chimera, the myth takes us to Lycia, a region of rugged mountains and deep valleys on the southern coast of Anatolia. In the ancient world, this was a real place, with real ships arriving on real tides. The coast is edged with inlets, the water glittering in long afternoon light, and behind it, the land rises quickly into pine-covered slopes. Paths twist between rocks. Goats pick their way across ledges with quiet confidence. The wind carries the resin scent of conifers. And sometimes, when the day warms, the air smells of time crushed underfoot. The Chimera, the poet said, lived there. Sometimes they described her as lion in the front, goat in the middle, and serpent in the tail. Sometimes they spoke of a second head, goat-headed, rising from her back. And always, they gave her the power of flame, not a friendly flame, not the flame of a lamp, but a breath that burns. Yet even this, if you imagine it gently, can be seen as part of the landscape. In Lycia, there are places where the earth itself releases fire. Natural vents can burn for years, quiet flames licking from stone, steady as if the mountain has its own hidden hearth. So the Chimera may be a monster, but she is also a way of speaking about the earth, about the strange marriage of stone and fire. Imagine a hillside at dusk. The sky is lavender and pale gold. The shadows in the valley stretch long and slow. A shepherd stands with his flock, counting softly, listening to the bells. Somewhere up the slope, a faint glow pulses, and in the calm air you can smell something like soot, something like hot metal. No one sees the creature clearly, but they speak of her anyway, because a glow without an obvious cause asks for a story, and a story offers the mind a shape to hold. The tale brings us a hero, and it does so without rushing. Bellerophon comes, not as loudly famous as Heracles, but with his own quiet burden. He is a man marked by misunderstanding, by exile, by the strange way reputations move between cities. He carries the restless feeling of someone who cannot fully belong. In some tellings, he is sent to face the Chimera as a kind of elegant punishment, a task meant to end him without anyone having to say openly that they wished him gone. This is the gentle cruelty of courts and kings, and the Greeks knew it well, to offer someone a mission that looks like honor while being, in truth, a dismissal. Yet Bellerophon is not alone. The myth gives him Pegasus, the winged horse, white as sea foam and bright as moonlight, a creature that turns the landscape itself into something wider. You can picture the moment of preparation with calm detail. The horse stands on a stony plain, its hooves making small sounds on gravel. Its breath comes out in gentle clouds in the cool of early morning. The man runs a hand along the animal's neck, feeling muscle under smooth hair, feeling warmth. Leather straps are adjusted with care. Metal rings catch the first light of dawn. Nothing is hurried. Even a legendary task begins with simple hands and small movements. When Pegasus lifts into the air, it is not a violent motion. It is a smooth leaving, like a sigh, wings open, and the sound is like cloth unfurling, like wind passing through a canopy. The ground falls away, The hills become patterns. The ravines become gentle shadows. The world below looks peaceful, even if someone down there is frightened by the thought of fire and teeth. From above, you can see how small a rumor is, how it clings to one valley and does not touch the next. And yet the rumor has a home, and in its home it feels enormous. Approaching the hillside, the air changes, even at a distance. There is a faint warmth, as if the sun itself is closer. The smell of pine mixes with something sharper. The wind curls strangely around the rocks, carrying heat in invisible ribbons. You can imagine the sound of it, a low, restless whisper, as if the earth is breathing through narrow cracks. Below, goats scatter. Birds keep their distance. There is a silence that is not empty, only cautious, as though the place itself has learned to wait. When the Chimera appears, think of her not as a sudden nightmare, but as a creature that has been there all along. Stepping out of a shadowed cleft, a lion's shoulders move first, heavy and controlled. The goat's head, if it is there, turns with a different kind of watchfulness, almost domestic, almost familiar, and yet wrong in its placement. The serpent tail coils with slow intention, making a soft scraping sound on stone. The creature's skin catches light differently on each part. Fur here, hide there, scales farther back, each texture reflecting the fire glow with its own quiet language. Bellerophon does not need to step close. That is the gift of flight, and also the calm wisdom of distance. Circling above, he watches, and he waits for the creature to turn, to expose a line of vulnerability. Some tellings speak of a spear tipped with lead, a small, heavy material that changes when heated. The Chimera breathes, and the breath is fire, and the fire touches the metal. The lead softens, it melts, it flows where it should not, and the monster's own nature becomes the instrument of her end. In this, the tale offers a soft lesson. Not every challenge is met by force against force. Sometimes it is met by allowing the challenge to reveal its own weakness, by using heat against itself, by using patience and position rather than anger. As the Chimera falls, the hillside remains. That is important. The earth does not change its nature simply because a story reaches its ending. If there were flames in rock before, they may still be there after. Shepherds may still smell soot on certain winds. Travelers may still see a glow at night. The myth does not erase the landscape. It rests on it, like a thin blanket laid gently over stone. And perhaps that is why these tales were comforting in their own way. They did not demand that the world become safe. They only suggested that the world could be understood, named, and approached with a steadier heart. Now, from Lycia and its warm cliffs, the path of myth curves back toward Greece, toward a different kind of monster, one made not of mismatched bodies, but of riddles, of language, of questions asked in the half-light. This is the Sphinx, and her home is not a swamp or a venting hillside, but a road near Thebes, where travelers pass, where human lives touch one another, where the mind itself becomes the place of danger. Thebes was a city of walls and gates, of legends layered on legends. In the time of myth, it is already old. already heavy with stories of founders and curses, of families repeating patterns they do not fully understand. Roads lead to it through fields and low hills. At certain times of day, the light on these roads is gentle and dusty, and the air smells of dry grass, of crushed thyme, of warm earth. You can picture a traveler walking, staff in hand, cloak pulled close against the evening cool. The sound of footsteps is steady, almost soothing, and the horizon holds the dark outline of the city like a quiet promise of shelter. Somewhere along such a road, the Sphinx waits. In Greek imagination, she is often described with a woman's face and a lion's body, with wings that fold like a bird's. She is not only a beast, she is a pause. She is the moment when a journey stops and becomes an examination. She does not rush at travelers. She speaks. Her voice, in the old stories, is not always shouted. You can imagine it low and clear, carrying easily across a quiet path, as steady as the sound of a stream moving over stones. She asks a riddle, a simple question that seems harmless, and yet is heavy with consequence. Many fail. The myth says she takes them, that she destroys them, and so the road becomes a place of dread. But we can listen to this more softly. The dread is the dread of being asked something you do not know, the dread of being seen, of being measured, of having your mind tested when you are already tired from travel. The Sphinx is the anxiety of the human intellect, given feathers and claws so it can sit beside the road and feel, for a moment, as solid as stone. The riddle itself is famous, and because it is famous, it feels almost like an object you can hold. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at midday, and 3 in the evening? The answer is a human being crawling as a child, walking upright as an adult, leaning on a staff in old age. It is a gentle truth when heard in a calm voice. It is the shape of a life. It is time passing. It is the body changing. The Greeks placed this riddle on the road to Thebes because Thebes, in their imagination, was a city where knowledge and tragedy mingle, a place where understanding does not always protect you, but still matters. Oedipus comes to the road, and the story of Oedipus is a long one, full of shadows. But for now, we can hold only this moment, this quiet meeting with the Sphinx. He is a traveler, dusty, thoughtful, carrying his own unspoken worries. The air around him is still. The sun is low. A bird calls once from a distant tree and then is silent. He sees the creature on the rock, the strange outline of wings and lion limbs. The human face turned toward him with an expression that might be curiosity, might be boredom, might be the calm impatience of someone who has been waiting too long. When she asks her question, Oedipus does not answer with drama. He answers as though he has been waiting for such a question, as though it matches something he already carries inside. He says, "It is a human being." And with that, the myth says, the Sphinx is defeated. Some versions have her cast herself down. Others simply have her vanish, as a nightmare vanishes at dawn. However it happens, the road opens again, and people can pass. Thebes is saved for a moment, though the larger tragedy is still ahead, like a slow shadow stretching toward the city. The Sphinx, like the Hydra and the Chimera, is an image with layers. She is a monster. Yes, but she is also a reminder that language can trap us, that questions can hold power, that a life moves through stages as steadily as the sun moves through the sky. If you listen with sleep in your mind, you can let her become less frightening and more like a stone marker on a path, reminding you that you are allowed to change, allowed to age, allowed to be different in different seasons of your life. The riddle is not a threat when held gently. It is simply a description of time, spoken in a quiet voice. Night settles over the imagined landscape with a slow tenderness. In Thebes, lamps would have been lit with olive oil, their flames small and steady, sheltered from wind by clay walls and narrow courtyards. The smell of smoke would mix with the smell of bread cooling on a hearth. Somewhere inside the city, a dog might bark once and then lie down again. Outside, on the road where the Sphinx once waited, the stones hold the day's warmth a little longer, and then release it into the cool air. A traveler might pass there now, hearing only his own footsteps, feeling the cool rise from the ground, and never knowing how many minds have paused at this same bend in the road. If you carry anything from these tales into your own quiet hours, let it be this. The Greeks did not place monsters only in distant caves. They placed them beside springs, beside cliffs, beside roads that ordinary people walked. Fear is not always far away. It can be near, woven into daily life. And yet, even when it is near, it can be met with steadiness, with attention, with a small cleverness, with a simple answer spoken at the right moment. The road continues, and the night remains wide and quiet, and we continue with it, unhurried, toward the next soft turning of the story, from the road near Thebes, where a single riddle once slowed the feet of travelers. The stories drift toward an island that seems to float between sea and sky like a quiet thought. Crete. Even the name sounds like stone warmed by sun, and salt carried on a steady breeze. In the age of myth, Crete is not only a place on a map, it is a threshold, a meeting of human craft and divine will. A place where a palace can feel like a maze, and where a maze can feel like the inside of the mind. Picture the approach by sea. In the long-ago season when bronze still shone like new honey, and when the oarlocks of ships were polished, smooth by many hands, the water is a wide, slow blue, lightly wrinkled by wind, reflecting the high light of midday in broken silver shards. A vessel moves without haste, its wooden ribs speaking in soft creaks and little sighs as it rides each swell. The sail breathes, filling and easing, as if it is learning a calm rhythm for the day. Rope fibers rub softly, a small whisper of texture, and somewhere beneath it all, you can hear the steady, patient slap of water against the hull, like a hand tapping gently on a door that never locks. Above, gulls glide with patient wings, and their cries fall like thin ribbons of sound that do not demand anything from you. Farther out, the sea is almost glassy, and closer in, it is patterned with small ripples that catch the light. Then let it go. The horizon line is steady. It gives the mind something simple to rest against. In that steadiness, even the idea of danger seems far away, as if it belongs to another story told by another voice. When the ship reaches harbor, the sound changes. Water laps against stone in slow, repeating phrases. Voices drift from the shore, not sharp, only ordinary, softened by distance and by the open air between speaker and listener. There is the small clatter of amphorae being set down, the soft thud of sandals on planks. The occasional bright note of metal as a hook is lifted and laid aside. The sunlight is strong, yet it does not feel harsh. It feels steady, like a hand laid lightly on the shoulder, a presence that warms without pressing. The scent of the island is a mixture seaweed drying on rocks, crushed herbs underfoot, smoke from cooking fires, and that faint, sweet smell that comes from figs and grapes when they are heavy with juice. You might also catch the faint aroma of sheep, of leather, of olive oil carried in clay jars, and of flowers that grow stubbornly in thin soil. It is an alive scent, but it is not exciting. It is simply the scent of a place where people have been living, walking, and breathing for a long time. Inland, beyond the harbor's everyday business, the palace of Knossos rises. In the stories, it is a place of corridors and rooms and stairways that turn back on themselves, a place where light enters from above, through open courts, and then spills into passageways in pale ribbons. Even if you have never seen such a palace, you can imagine how a large building becomes confusing. A corner looks familiar. A hall branches into two. A stair leads down into cooler air. Footsteps echo differently depending on whether a ceiling is high or low, whether a wall is close or far, whether the floor is stone or packed earth. Myth takes that human experience, the feeling of being turned around, and deepens it into a legend. The labyrinth, not merely a complicated palace, but a deliberate design, a world within walls, a place made to hold something, to keep it hidden and contained. The Greeks had a way of making the invisible visible. A fear becomes a shape. A confusion becomes a building. A secret becomes a door that leads down. They said the labyrinth was built by Daedalus, the master craftsman, the man whose hands could persuade wood and stone into forms that felt almost alive. Daedalus belongs to the quiet side of heroism, the side where intelligence is the main instrument, where the steady attention of the mind is as sharp as any blade. In these tales, skill is never neutral. It is admired, and it is feared, because skill can serve a king, and then trap the one who serves. Imagine Daedalus in a workshop that smells of sawdust and warm resin. Light falls in through a high opening, making a pale square on the floor. Tools rest on shelves, chisels with wooden handles darkened by sweat, bronze blades polished to a dull gleam, awls, plumb lines, measuring cords. There is a rhythm to his work, a calm tapping and scraping, the quiet testing of joints and angles. His eyes move steadily, not rushing, as if he is listening to the shape of things before he makes them. In the corner, a jar of water sits, and when he drinks, the water is cool and tastes faintly of clay. Even small details like that feel important, because myth often grows from the ordinary. Then imagine the king who commands him. Minos rules Crete in the stories, with the authority of a man who believes the island is his by right. And perhaps it was. Minos is also woven into older currents of myth, into the sea and the bull and the strange bargains between human pride and divine refusal. The creature at the center, the Minotaur, is often told as a punishment and an outcome, at once a bull-headed being with a human body, born from a tangled story of vows not kept and gifts misused. Yet tonight, we do not need to dwell on the tangled beginnings like thorns. Tonight, we can let the past sit where it is, like old smoke on ancient beams, present but not choking. The labyrinth is not only a prison for the creature, it is also a way for the palace and the island to keep their own dread at a distance. Some problems are easier to live with when they are placed behind walls, when they are given a name, when they are kept out of sight. And so the myth imagines that below the bright courts of Knossos, below the painted columns and the cool shade of storerooms, there is another realm of stone passages and dim turns, where air is cooler and smells faintly of damp limestone, where footsteps sound too loud, and where even a whisper seems to get lost. You might picture the descent, a stairway curving downward, each step slightly worn in the center by the weight of many feet, a torch carried carefully, its flame sheltered from drafts by a hand held close. The torch makes a small sound, a thin crackle, and the light it casts is restless, sliding over walls and making shadows that shift like slow water. The deeper you go, the more the sound of the palace above fades, until what remains is only the quiet drum of your own breath and the soft scrape of sand under sandals. In such a place, time feels different, without the changing light of sun and cloud. The mind measures moments by other things, by the drip of water, by the heat of the torch, by the way the air smells. And that smell is specific, not dramatic, but steady, cold stone, faint moisture, a touch of old smoke that has lingered in cracks, the mineral scent of earth that has been hidden from daylight. The victims, in many tellings, come from Athens, a tribute, a debt, a reminder of power. Every few years, a number of youths are sent across the sea to Crete, and the sea journey itself becomes part of the sorrow. The horizon is far, and the ship moves as if it has all the time in the world. The salt dries on lips, the wind is cool at night, and blankets smell of wool and old sun. Stars hang overhead, indifferent, beautiful, and too distant to be comforting. The young ones sit close together and speak in low voices about home, about streets they have walked, about bread they have eaten, about the way a parent's hand felt on the back of the head. Some go silent. Some stare at the black water and listen to the ship's creaks as if the ship itself is making a long complaint. It is easy, in the waking world, to imagine this story as loud and cruel, but in the tone of bedtime myth, the cruelty is softened into distance, as if seen from far away across years and water. We do not need to bring the screams close. We can keep the focus on the slow, heavy feeling of inevitability, the way the body becomes tired of fear, and the way even fear, when it lasts long enough, turns into a dull, steady ache rather than a sharp spike. And then, as in so many Greek tales, a hero arrives. Theseus. He is a young man with the look of someone who has already decided, and the decision itself has made him calm. He stands among the other youths in the harbor light. The sun touches his shoulders. Salt wind moves his hair slightly. He looks at the palace from below, at its many openings and levels, and he does not pretend it is simple. He knows a labyrinth is meant to confuse. He knows it is meant to swallow direction and to blur memory. Yet he steps forward because he believes a human being can still walk through confusion and come out again. There is also another presence, quieter still. Ariadne, daughter of Minos, enters the tale like a lantern carried gently in a hallway. She sees Theseus, and something in her shifts. Not violently, only enough to change the direction of her life. The Greeks often told love as an opening of doors, a turning of the mind toward a new corridor. Ariadne's gift is not a sword and not a shield. It is thread, a simple tool, the sort of thing used in ordinary rooms, used by careful hands to mend cloth, to stitch and bind. In myth, this simple thread becomes the way out. Imagine the moment she offers it, not as a dramatic declaration, but as a quiet exchange in a passage where the palace air smells faintly of oil lamps and polished wood. Somewhere above, in an open court, you can hear the distant splash of a fountain. Somewhere nearer, a servant's footsteps pass and fade. Ariadne speaks softly, and her words are practical. She presses the spool into Theseus's palm. It is small and light, and yet it feels heavy with meaning. She tells him what to do: tie it at the entrance, unwind it as he goes, and if he survives, follow it back. That is the gentle genius of the myth. It does not promise that fear will not appear. It does not pretend that danger is only an illusion. It simply offers a method. Hold a line, keep a connection, remember the way back. The entrance to the labyrinth is not magical. It is a doorway, a mouth of stone. Theseus steps in, and with him the torchlight and the faint sound of breathing. The thread is tied, and the thread begins its slow unspooling, touching the ground like a pale line laid down by a patient hand. Inside, the air is different, cooler, slightly wet. It carries the smell of stone that has never fully dried, stone that holds the memory of underground water. The torch crackles softly. Each time Theseus turns a corner, the flame leans, responding to a draft that seems to come from nowhere. The walls are close enough that he can brush them with his fingertips, feeling their roughness and their coldness. That touch can be strangely calming. The wall is real. The passage is real. The present moment is real. And the thread is real too. A thin certainty in the middle of uncertainty. The labyrinth does not rush him. It offers choices. A left turn, a right turn, a downward slope that grows darker, a stair that leads up and then stops. The sound of his steps echoes and returns, and sometimes it returns altered, as if the corridors themselves are speaking in small, confusing syllables. Yet the thread remains faithful. It trails behind him with a soft whisper against the ground. In that whisper, there is a promise, a line back, a memory of the door, a simple path through a complicated space. As he goes deeper, the torchlight seems smaller, as if the darkness around it is a soft woolen cloak that absorbs brightness. In the edges of vision, shadows gather, but they do not leap. They only wait. There is the faint drip of water somewhere, regular and calm, like the ticking of a hidden clock. There might also be the muffled movement of something far away, a weight shifting, a slow breath being released. Somewhere deeper, there is a sound that is not his, a low exhale, a scrape like horn against rock. The Minotaur is near. If you imagine him, let him be heavy rather than fast, a creature shaped for strength and endurance. He has lived in dimness so long that he might not even think of the sun as something real. He moves by scent, by vibration, by the way air carries warmth. He is alone in his maze, and loneliness itself can make a creature strange. Perhaps he is not always raging. Perhaps he sometimes stands still, listening to the drip of water, smelling the smoke of torches when it comes, feeling the distant tremble of footsteps through stone. In a place without daylight, time becomes a slow blur. A day is the same as a night. Hunger comes and goes. Memory, if it exists, rises and fades like mist that cannot choose a shape. When Theseus meets him, the moment is not a burst of noise in our telling. It is a quiet collision of two lives in a narrow chamber. Torchlight throws moving shadows. The bull's head turns. The nostrils flare, drawing in the scent of human sweat and smoke. Theseus feels the tightness in his own chest, the quickening of his pulse, the weight of the sword in his hand. The air seems to pause. Even the drip of water seems to hold its breath. The struggle, in the old myth, ends with the hero's victory. We do not need to paint it with sharp edges. We can keep it like a distant sound behind a closed door, the thud of bodies, the scrape of feet, the rough breath of exertion. And then, gradually, a settling. The torch flame steadies. The corridor grows quiet again. Theseus stands, alive, with the thread still trailing behind him, like the calm line of a thought that has not broken. Then comes the return, which is its own kind of work. It is one thing to go into confusion. It is another to come out. Theseus turns, and he follows the thread. Each step back feels different from each step in. Corners that were uncertain now feel familiar. The air grows slightly warmer, as if the labyrinth is releasing him. The faint sounds from above begin to appear, again distant voices. The soft flutter of a bird in a courtyard. The hint of a breeze moving through open spaces. The smell changes too, slowly, from damp stone to oil lamp smoke, from mineral coldness to the faint sweetness of stored grain and polished wood. When he reaches the entrance, the light from outside is pale and almost gentle, as if the day has continued without needing to know what happened underground. Ariadne waits. Her face is calm, but her hands might tighten for a moment around the edge of her garment, because even calm contains feeling. The two of them move quickly, not in panic, but in the quiet urgency of those who understand that the palace has its own laws and that those laws may not protect them. They go to the ship. The sea is ready, as it always is, patient and wide. The sail is raised. The oars dip. The shoreline of Crete pulls away, and with it the heavy presence of stone corridors and underground cold. In the soft monotone of myth, there is always another turn. Ariadne does not keep her place beside Theseus forever. On an island called Naxos, she is left behind in many tellings while he sails on. The reasons vary, and the feeling remains. Love can be a thread, and threads can be cut. She wakes to a quieter shore, to the sound of waves repeating themselves on sand, to gulls circling above. The sky is wide, the wind is mild. The ship is a small shape on the horizon, already moving toward the line where sea meets sky, where distance becomes a kind of silence. This is not a scene for shouting tonight. It is a scene for stillness. Ariadne stands in the sand. She feels the cool grain under her feet. She tastes salt on her lips. Her chest tightens, then loosens, as if the body itself does not know which emotion to choose first. The island around her is calm. Pine trees hold the wind in their needles and let it go in a soft sigh. Somewhere, waves break and retreat, as if the world is reminding her that everything comes and goes. The Greeks did not always give comfort easily, but they sometimes gave transformation. Some stories say Dionysus finds her, the god of vines and gentle intoxication, the loosener of knots in the mind. The air around him might smell of crushed grapes and warm leaves. The light might feel softer when he steps into it, as if evening is arriving early. He speaks, and his voice is not a command but a slow invitation. He makes her his bride, and the story turns away from abandonment toward a different kind of belonging, one that is less about human promise and more about the strange generosity of gods. Whether you prefer that ending or another, the image that lingers is the simplest one, a thread leading out of darkness. It is a quiet comfort. Not every maze can be destroyed. Not every fear can be erased. But sometimes, if you keep a line, if you remember where you came from, you can walk your way back into light, step by step, without needing to run. And as the sea repeats its patient music against the shore of Crete and Naxos and every island in between, the mind can take that image and hold it gently, like something small and steady in the palm of the hand. After the labyrinth, the myths often return you to the sea, because the sea is the oldest lullaby the Greeks knew. It speaks in repetition. It never fully stops. It carries ships the way a long breath carries a quiet thought. And so, in the next drifting chapter, we meet a different kind of monster. Not one held behind walls, but one that lives in sound itself. Think of a ship leaving an island at dawn. The sky is pale, washed with thin pink near the horizon, and a cooler blue above. The water is calm enough to reflect that color in long, gentle bands. Oars enter and leave the surface with the softest splash, and each stroke makes a small swirl that expands, then fades, as if the sea is always forgiving the disturbance. The air is cool. It smells of salt and wet wood. When you inhale, your chest feels clean, as if the world has been rinsed overnight. On the deck, there are quiet details that make the scene feel real. A coil of rope sits near the mast, its fibers rough against the skin if you touch it, smelling of sea and sun. A clay jar of water rests in the shade, its surface cool and slightly damp, because clay holds the night inside it for a while. Somewhere a blanket is folded, smelling faintly of wool and smoke. The men move without speaking much. Their sandals make a soft rasp on planks. When someone clears his throat, it sounds louder than expected, because the morning is still, and the day has not yet filled itself with noise. In the old tales, Odysseus is the traveler who carries many stories inside him. He is clever, yes, but his cleverness is not sharp tonight. Tonight, it is slow and steady, like a hand counting beads, like a mind choosing patience. His ship moves through waters that are both real and symbolic, waters that hold ordinary wind and also the unseen currents of fate. The men around him are tired. Their shoulders have learned the weight of oars. Their hands have calluses. They speak less than they once did, because long journeys teach the tongue to rest. The island behind them grows smaller. The day grows brighter. Somewhere, far off, there might be dolphins rising and falling in simple arcs. Somewhere, closer, the wake of the ship repeats itself. A ribbon of broken light. The sky is open and does not ask questions. And in that calm setting, the story introduces a warning, because even calm has its hidden edges. There is a place ahead where song is dangerous. The Sirens. Even their name feels like a whisper. They are not described only as claws or teeth. Their weapon is beauty. And beauty, when it is aimed at the mind, can be as binding as any chain. The Greeks understood that the most powerful temptations are not always loud. Sometimes they are soft. Sometimes they sound like comfort. Sometimes they sound like the exact thing you have been longing to hear in the quiet parts of yourself, the parts you do not speak of in daylight. Imagine the coastline where the Sirens live. It is not bustling. It is quiet, almost too quiet, with pale rocks rising from water and small patches of grass clinging where it can. The sun might make the rocks look bleached, as if they have been washed by wind for centuries. The waves break there in a steady pattern, not wild, but insistently repetitive. The air above the water is warm, and it carries a faint sweet scent from flowering plants hidden farther inland. From a distance, it seems peaceful. That is part of the danger. Peace can sometimes be a mask the world wears. Odysseus has been warned, not by a shouting prophet, but by Circe, whose counsel in this part of the story arrives like evening smoke, curling and quiet. Picture her house in the woods, where light filters through leaves and makes moving patches on the floor. Herbs hang from beams, dry and fragrant, smelling of mint, thyme, and darker roots you cannot name. A pot simmers, and the steam carries a mild bitterness that clears the head. Circe's voice is low. Her eyes are steady. She does not threaten, she explains, as if she is speaking to someone who must understand, because understanding itself is a kind of safety. She says there are two ways to pass the Sirens. One is to block the sound entirely and never know what it was. The other is to hear and survive by choosing restraint. The first is simple. The second is dangerous. But Odysseus is a man made from questions. He has traveled too far to accept only silence. He wants to hear, not because he is reckless, but because curiosity is a kind of hunger, and hunger can feel like a promise. Circe tells him what to do. She says, "Fill your men's ears with wax. Tie yourself to the mast. And if you beg, if you rage, if you weep, if you command, let them tighten the rope and row harder. The preparation on the ship is practical, almost domestic. Wax is softened in hands. It is warm and pliable, smelling faintly of honey and heat. The men roll it between their fingers and then press it gently into their ears. They do not press hard. They do not rush. They do it as if they are tucking a child in with care, making a small nest of silence. After that, the world around them becomes muffled. Their own breathing sounds closer. The sea seems quieter, as if it is now far away behind a wall. For Odysseus, the choice is different. He tells his men to bind him to the mast. Rope wraps around his body, firm but not cutting. The mast is warm from the sun. The rope smells of salt and old fiber. He tests the binding with a small shift of his shoulders. It holds. There is a strange comfort in that firmness. A part of the mind relaxes when it knows a limit is real. Odysseus looks at each man and makes sure they understand. He speaks slowly. He says, "Do not listen to me when the song begins. Do not trust my face. Do not trust my words. Trust only the plan we made in calm." The men nod. Their eyes are tired but steady. Their silence is not emptiness. It is focus. They grip their oars. The wood has been smoothed by years of hands. It fits the palm like something familiar. A small bead of sweat forms on a brow and rolls down slowly, even before the work begins, because the sun is already warming. The ship continues forward. Oars dip and rise. The men look ahead. Their faces are calm in a strange way, because the wax has placed them behind a veil. The sun climbs. The air warms. And then, without any obvious change in the water or wind, the song begins. At first it might feel like it is coming from the rocks, as if the stones themselves have learned to sing. Then it becomes clearer, like a thread pulled from a spool. The sound is not loud. It is intimate. It seems to arrive inside the mind rather than in the air. It is a melody that feels familiar, even if you have never heard it. It feels like a memory of home, like the voice of someone who knows your name and has been speaking it softly for a long time. The sirens do not only sing notes, they sing meaning. They sing the shape of your own desire to Odysseus. They promise knowledge. They promise stories. They promise that if he comes closer, if he lets the ship drift toward the rocks, everything he has ever wondered about will be answered gently. Their words, in some tellings, speak of Troy and of the fates of men, of the hidden reasons behind suffering, of the secrets that lie beneath God's decisions. But even without naming those details, the feeling is clear. Come, and you will not be lonely with your questions anymore. Come, and you will finally be understood. His body reacts before his mind can argue. His hands strain against the rope. His chest lifts as he pulls in breath. The rope bites a little, and the small discomfort makes him more urgent, because he believes, for a moment, that the rope is the only thing keeping him from a reward. His skin feels too tight over his bones. His heart seems to knock on the inside of his ribs. He calls out. His voice may sound rough to him, but the men cannot hear it. They row on, their faces blank with concentration. Odysseus calls again. He says, "Untie me." He says, "I command you." He says, I will reward you. He says, you do not understand what you are refusing. And still the ship keeps moving. The oars keep their rhythm. The wake continues behind them. The coastline slides past. Pale rock, pale foam, pale sunlight. The song does not become angry. It becomes more beautiful, more pleading, as if the sirens themselves are saddened by his refusal. It promises that this is the last moment, that this is the single opening in time when truth can be taken. The mind loves such promises. The mind wants to believe that one step will solve everything. That is why the rope matters. That is why the plan matters. Because in the middle of longing, the mind cannot always protect itself. Slowly, as the ship passes beyond the reach of that sound, the melody thins. It stretches into silence. It fades the way a dream fades when you wake, leaving only a faint impression, like a hand that touched the mind and then withdrew. The world becomes ordinary again. Ordinary does not mean empty. Ordinary means safe. Odysseus slumps against the mast, breathing hard. His face is damp with sweat. The rope is tight. The sun is bright. The sea continues. Indifferent, the men, still rowing, see his signal that it is safe. They remove the wax slowly, and the world returns in layers, the slap of water against the hull, the creak of timber, the whistle of wind in rigging, the simple sound of their own voices as they speak again. One man laughs softly, not in joy, but in relief, as if he has been holding his breath for a long time. Another man spits over the side, a small gesture, as if clearing something bitter from his mouth. The ship sails on, and behind them, the Sirens' rocks become just another line on the horizon. If the Sirens are temptation, the next danger is different. It is not a sound that calls you inward. It is a narrowing of space, a place where the sea itself becomes a corridor. The story names it with two mouths, one on each side, Scylla and Charybdis. Imagine the strait at midday. The cliffs rise steeply. Their faces are rough and pale, with dark crevices like half-closed eyes. The sun cannot reach the bottom of every crack, so there are pockets of shadow even in bright light. The air between the cliffs feels tighter, as if the wind has less room to move. The water here is not as calm. It swirls. It changes direction in small, confusing patterns. A floating piece of driftwood might spin for a moment, then shoot forward, then pause again, tugged by unseen force. Even the sound of the sea is different here, less like a lullaby, more like a low, busy murmur, as if the water is speaking to itself. Charybdis is not a creature with a face in most tellings. It is a force, a mouth of water that drinks the sea and spits it back out. 3 times a day, the story says, the water sinks, forming a whirlpool, and then surges back with a flood. Tonight, we can imagine it not as a roar, but as a deep, steady pull, a vast breathing. Inhale, the water sinks. Exhale, the water rises, like something sleeping beneath the surface, turning in slow rhythms that cannot be negotiated with. When the water draws down, it draws down foam. It draws down seaweed. It draws down broken branches. It draws down anything that floats too near. And when it releases with the same indifference, because forces of nature do not mean well or ill. They simply are. On the other side is Scylla, who is given a body and hunger. She lives in a cave in the cliff, and her heads reach out. The stories differ in number and description, but the feeling is the same. She is the danger that snatches. The sudden loss, the sharp consequence of sailing too close. The cave mouth is dark. It looks like a bruise in the cliff face. Sometimes the wind passing over it makes a low, hollow note, as if the stone itself is moaning. High above, birds cling to ledges, and their calls bounce off the rock in small echoes that make distance hard to judge. Odysseus must steer between them. This is one of those moments in myth that feels like life. Sometimes there is no perfect route. Sometimes you choose between two risks, and you do so with a steady hand and a heavy heart, because you understand that the sea does not always allow clean outcomes. He keeps the ship closer to Scylla, because Circe has warned him that Charybdis can swallow the whole vessel. He does not tell his men everything, not because he is cruel, but because fear can weaken oar arms and loosen rhythm. He tells them what they need. Row hard. Keep steady. Do not look up. Do not break the pace. The men row. Their muscles move in practiced sequence. Their breath comes in controlled pushes. The wood of the oars warms under their hands. Sweat forms and runs down temples, tasting salt on lips when it reaches the mouth. A shoulder aches and keeps moving anyway. A wrist cramps and keeps moving anyway. They have been traveling too long to stop for what the body complains about. The ship enters the narrow water. The current tugs. The hull tilts slightly as it rides a swirl. The cliff face passes close enough that you can see small plants growing from cracks. Stubborn green against stone. You can see birds nested on ledges, their feathers ruffled by wind. You can smell the cliff itself. That chalky mineral scent warmed by sun. The air here feels warmer and cooler at once. Warm in the sunlight. Cool where shadow falls. Odysseus grips the steering oar. His palms are damp. The wood is smooth and alive under his hands. He makes small adjustments. Not dramatic. Just enough. A little left. Hold. A little more. Now, steady. On the far side, the water near Charybdis shows its own warning. The surface seems to dip. Foam gathers in a ring. The pull is not visible like a rope, yet it is felt. A floating leaf, a piece of bark, a bit of rope end, all drift subtly toward that center. It is like watching dust move toward a quiet corner of a room. Drawn by air you cannot see, Odysseus keeps the ship away from it with patient focus. His mind narrows to the present. He does not let it wander to past losses or future hopes. He stays with the angle of the hull, with the feel of current, with the sound of oars striking water. In a way, this is another labyrinth, only made of moving water instead of stone. And then there is the moment when Scylla strikes. In a bedtime telling, we do not watch it closely. We keep it at the edge. Like thunder, far away, a shadow moves above, a sudden rush of air, a cry that is brief, then gone. The oars falter for a heartbeat. Then the men row harder, driven by the simple instinct to get through. Odysseus feels the sting of helplessness, that particular sorrow of a leader who must choose and cannot protect everyone. His jaw tightens. His eyes remain forward. He does not turn toward the cliff. He keeps the ship moving because stopping would invite the greater mouth of Charybdis. They pass. The water widens again. The cliffs fall away. The wind has more room to move, and it arrives as a gentler touch. The sea becomes less confused. The men breathe, and their breathing becomes less strained. A quiet settles on the deck, the quiet of people who have been close to the edge and have returned. Someone wipes his face with the back of his hand. Someone stares at the horizon as if he needs a far line to reassure his eyes. Someone murmurs a name, and then falls silent. The ship continues, carrying both loss and survival, because that is how many journeys are made. In these sea stories, the monsters are not always separate from the traveler. The sirens live in longing for answers. Charybdis lives in fear of being swallowed by what you cannot control. Scylla lives in the sudden bite of consequence. And Odysseus, tied to the mast, steering through the strait, is the image of the mind choosing to continue, even when continuation is imperfect. As the sun begins to lower, the color of the water shifts from hard blue to softer gold. The air cools. The taste of salt becomes gentler. The ship moves on. The oars slow. The sail takes more of the work. Over the sea, far away, an evening haze forms, smoothing the horizon into something almost dreamlike. When night arrives, it does not drop suddenly. It settles. The first star appears, then another, then many, as if someone is lighting small lamps far above. The men speak in low voices. The ship's motion becomes a steady rocking, the kind that invites the body to loosen. And in that rocking, in that repeating hush of water against wood, the mind can rest again, as if it has listened to danger from a safe distance and now returns to the comfort of steady motion, carried onward by a sea that never stops breathing. There comes a time on the sea when even the waves seem to grow tired of their own motion. After the narrow strait, after the harsh pull of fear and the fading edge of song, the water opens out into a broad, quiet plain, and the wind finds a gentler way to move. The horizon steadies itself like a calm line drawn across the mind, and the ship slips forward as if it is being carried by patience rather than force. In the day, sunlight rests on the surface in trembling sheets. In the night, the stars hang low and clear, and the wood of the ship answers the sea with soft creaks, like a slow breathing in the dark. Odysseus carries his weariness the way a long traveler carries a cloak. It is always there, laid over his shoulders, warmed by his own body, heavy with salt and time. He does not speak of it, because he has spoken of so many things already, and words have a way of thinning out when the body has been stripped by years. He stands at the rail sometimes and looks down at the water, where the darkness is full of slow movement, and he thinks of Ithaca as if it is both an island and a prayer. He remembers the scent of olive trees after rain, the dry warmth of stone walls in late afternoon, the quiet smoke from a hearth that means supper is near, and Penelope's presence like a steady lamp in a room. The ship continues, and the world offers them at last a pause, a place where welcome is not a trap and kindness is not a disguise. The island of the Phaeacians lies like a secret kept by the sea, protected by distance and by the simple luck of being overlooked. The shore is gentle, the sand is pale. Near land, the water is clear enough to show stones below, round and smooth, as if they have been polished by years of soft turning. When waves reach the beach, they do not crash. They fold in, whisper, and slide back again, leaving a thin lace of foam that dissolves before it can become anything harsh. Odysseus comes ashore not with triumph, but with the careful need of someone who has been carrying too much for too long. His clothes are stiff with salt. His skin is roughened by wind. His hair holds knots that remember storms. He steps onto the ground, and the steadiness of it surprises him. After months of shifting decks, the unmoving earth makes his legs feel uncertain, as if the body is still learning how to trust. He walks a few paces, then slows, letting the warmth of sand underfoot, the faint smell of green growth, and the softer air sink into him. He finds shade beneath trees whose leaves move softly, making a sound like quiet conversation. The air smells different here, less of raw salt, more of earth and living plants, and something faintly sweet, like flowers that do not shout their perfume, but let it drift in thin threads. He lowers himself down, and the ground is cool beneath his shoulder. He closes his eyes, and sleep takes him, not as a command, not as an escape, but as the simple fact of a body finally allowed to rest. Morning arrives slowly. On this shore, morning is gentle, and it does not burst into the day as if it needs to prove itself. The light comes in layers, turning the mist to silver, touching the leaves with pale gold. It is then that another figure enters the story, soft as the first footsteps on wet sand. Nausicaa, daughter of the Phaeacian king, comes to the water with her attendants to wash clothes. It is an ordinary task, and that ordinariness is soothing. They carry baskets. They talk in low voices. Their laughter is not loud, only light, like water running over stones. They kneel at the edge, where the sea is shallow and clear, and cloth darkens as it soaks, then lightens as it is lifted, then darkens again. The rhythm is steady. The sound of fabric slapped gently against stone becomes a quiet drumbeat, not exciting, only consistent, like a heart keeping time. When Nausicaa notices Odysseus, there is a pause, the kind of pause that happens when the mind sees something unexpected and tries to place it. Some of the attendants step back, startled, but Nausicaa remains. She is not foolish, but she is calm, and she carries the quiet confidence of someone who has grown up in a place where strangers are rare and welcome is a virtue. Odysseus, aware of his own battered appearance, speaks with care. His voice is hoarse, but respectful. He does not demand. He asks. He asks for a little cloth, a little food, a little direction. And in the asking there is no pride, only necessity. And necessity can be quiet when it is honest. Nausicaa offers him help with a simple grace, and that grace is one of the small miracles of the myth. She tells her attendants to leave cloth and oil. She tells Odysseus where he can wash, where he can clean the salt from his skin and smooth his hair, where he can make himself presentable again. The oil has a faint scent, herbal and warm. The cloth is rough but clean. The water is cool. and as he rinses, the sea's taste leaves his mouth, and the dust of travel leaves the creases of his hands. He becomes, slowly, more than a figure of exhaustion. He becomes a man again, held upright by kindness. They lead him toward the town in a careful way, not as if hiding him, but as if guiding him gently into a space where he belongs. The Phaeacian city feels like a place made for rest. Houses are built with order and calm. Courtyards hold olive trees whose leaves shimmer in the light. Water runs in channels, clear and steady, making a low sound as it moves. Like the hum of a lullaby, there are smells of bread baking, of fish roasting, of herbs crushed in a mortar. Lamps are lit at dusk, and their flame does not flicker wildly. Because the air here is mild, people speak in tones that do not strain the ear. Even music, when it comes, is measured, as if meant to settle the mind rather than stir it. In the hall of the king, Odysseus sits near a fire that is not raging. It is a steady bed of coals with small tongues of flame that rise and fall in a patient rhythm. Heat reaches his hands, and his fingers loosen. Someone offers him water, and the water tastes clean, as if it has never been trapped in a barrel for too long. Someone offers bread, and it is still warm, and the warmth travels into him like slow comfort. A cloak is placed around his shoulders, soft against skin rubbed raw by wind. The world becomes simple for a moment. Warmth, food, quiet voices, a roof above. The king asks for his story, and the hall becomes still in the way a room becomes still when it is listening. Odysseus speaks steadily, not quickly, as if laying stones in a path. He tells of Troy and of long wandering, of islands bright and strange, of storms that turned the sea into heaving darkness. He speaks of friends lost, not with dramatics, but with the sober tone of someone who knows grief can be carried quietly and still be heavy. He speaks of temptations that sounded like comfort, and of choices that had to be made in moments when the heart longed for rest. The listeners do not interrupt. The fire crackles softly. Outside, night gathers without haste. It is as if the world itself is making room for the telling. When he finishes, the Phaeacians do not challenge him. They do not ask him to prove himself. They decide simply to help. They offer him a ship, and men who know their oars. They offer gifts, cloth and bronze and small treasures, not as payment, but as a way of saying, "You have traveled far, and we honor the weight you carried." Preparations are careful and quiet. The hull is checked. The oars are set. Supplies are stacked in an orderly way. There is no frantic rush, only the calm competence of people who know how to do what must be done. At last, Odysseus boards. The sea is mild. The wind is favorable. As the ship slides away, he watches the island until it becomes a dark shape. Then a line. Then nothing. Night comes, and sleep takes him deep and heavy. It feels like the first true sleep in a long time, the kind where the body drops its guard because the air around it is not hostile. Stars turn slowly overhead. The ship cuts through water with a soft whisper. Oars move in a steady rhythm. Odysseus does not steer. He does not plan. He simply rests. And the rest itself feels like a promise that the endless wandering is finally thinning out. like mist, lifting from a shore. The ship reaches Ithaca while he sleeps. The myth offers this as a blessing, as if home arrives the way dawn arrives, quietly, without anyone pulling it into the sky. The shore is still. The sand is dark, with damp. The air smells of pine and earth. The Phaeacian men lift him carefully and lay him on the ground, still wrapped in his cloak, still sleeping. And they set his gifts beside him as gently as if they are laying down a child. Then they return to their ship, and their oars take them away, and the sea closes behind them, leaving Odysseus alone on the island that has lived in his mind for so long. When he wakes, the light is soft and low, the kind of light that comes when the sun has just begun its climb, and the world holds a thin veil of mist. At first he does not recognize the shore. After years away, even familiar stones can look strange. The hills seem shifted. The trees seem unfamiliar. He sits up and listens. Birds call in ordinary tones. Leaves move lightly in a breeze. A wave breaks in the distance and then dissolves. The silence is thick, not empty, full of small living sounds that do not hurry. A figure appears, and the story tells us it is Athena, come in disguise. The gods in Greek myth often arrive without thunder. They come with knowledge, quiet and certain. Athena speaks to him in a calm voice, and the calm itself feels like a steady hand on the shoulder. She tells him where he is. She tells him what has happened in his absence. Suitors have gathered in his house. They eat his food. They drink his wine. They press his wife, Penelope, to choose a new husband. Their presence is not a sudden violence, but a slow pressure, like weeds filling a garden if no one is there to tend it. Odysseus feels anger rise, but it rises slowly, like smoke from coals rather than a sudden flame. Athena advises patience. She changes his appearance, making him look like an old beggar, bent and weathered, so he can enter his own home unseen. The disguise is another kind of labyrinth, a way of walking through familiar corridors without being recognized. It is also a lesson in quiet endurance. Sometimes the return is not only arrival. Sometimes it is the careful reclaiming of what was always yours. He walks toward his home, and the land speaks to him in details. A stone wall guiding a path, a tree with a trunk twisted in a familiar way, the scent of thyme crushed underfoot, a goat bell far away. Its sound small and steady. The sun warms the stones. Dust rises in a thin veil when his feet move. He sees the line of his own fields, the slopes he once knew by heart. The sight does not make him run. It makes him slow down, because the heart can only hold so much at once, and too much joy too quickly can feel like pain. He meets a swineherd who has remained loyal, Eumaeus, and the name feels like an anchor dropped into deep water. The hut is simple. Smoke rises from a small fire, carrying the scent of burning wood. Inside, the air is warmer. The floor is packed earth. Tools hang on the wall. Food is plain but real, and it is offered with kindness. Eumaeus speaks to the stranger he believes Odysseus to be, and his voice holds the quiet honesty of someone who lives close to animals and weather and hard work. He offers shelter without asking for payment, because hospitality is not a bargain here. It is a way of being. They eat together, not richly, but warmly. Bread is torn and shared. Wine is poured in small measures. The fire makes a small circle of light. Outside, evening gathers. The wind cools. The sky deepens into indigo. Pigs settle in their pen with a low, steady sound, almost like a gentle murmur. Odysseus listens and says little. He learns. He waits. Night in the hut has its own slow texture. The fire settles into coals, and each coal holds a quiet red heart, breathing faintly. The smell of smoke clings to hair and cloth. Familiar and domestic. Nothing like the sharp smoke of burning ships. Eumaeus spreads rough bedding, and the wool is coarse, but it is dry, and that dryness itself feels like comfort after so many damp nights at sea. Outside, the wind moves through branches and makes a soft, repetitive sigh, as if the trees are practicing the same sound over and over until it becomes calm. Eumaeus speaks as the evening deepens, because loyal people sometimes fill the dark with speech, not to entertain, but to keep loneliness from becoming too sharp. He talks of the household, of Penelope's quiet dignity, of how she walks through the rooms with her head held steady even when her eyes look tired. He speaks of the suitors and their careless laughter, the way they spill wine and toss bones to the dogs, the way they treat the home as if it belongs to no one. His voice does not rise. It stays low, shaped by resignation and love, and the low voice itself makes the details feel like a slow, sad rain rather than a storm. Odysseus listens, and in listening, he feels the strange pain of being near his own life without touching it. He is on Ithaca. He is breathing Ithacan air, and yet he cannot simply walk into the hall and say his name. The disguise is a cloak heavier than any cloth. It is made of patience. It is made of time. He holds it around himself and waits for the right moment, because rushing would tear everything. In the myth, even the cleverest must sometimes practice stillness. At some point, the conversation fades, not because they finish, but because the night grows thick and the body begins to sink. The swineherd's breathing becomes slow and even. The fire makes a soft pop, then settles again. Odysseus lies with his eyes open for a while, feeling the steady weight of the island beneath him. He thinks of the bed he built long ago from an olive tree, rooted deep, the bed that cannot be moved. That memory is quiet and solid, like a promise carved into wood. He lets the thought rest in him, and his breathing slows, and the darkness becomes less sharp. Before dawn, the air turns cool. Mist gathers low. When Odysseus wakes, he steps outside and sees the land in a pale, early light. Hills are soft shapes against the sky. Dew clings to grass and makes it sparkle in tiny points. The scent of earth is strong, and it carries with it the faint sweetness of plants waking. He hears a distant rooster, then another, and the sound is simple, homely, almost tender. For a moment, the years of war and wandering feel like a long, strange dream, and Ithaca feels like the only real place. Athena's guidance is still there, like a clear thread through cloth. The plan is not only for victory, but for recognition. And recognition in the Odyssey is slow and layered. It is the way a face becomes known again when you have been away too long. It is the way a voice, heard in a hallway, makes the heart pause. It is the way a scar, shown in lamplight, can carry more truth than 1,000 speeches. The myth prepares these quiet recognitions, and it does so patiently, like a careful hand smoothing wrinkles from a garment. And in this waiting, the thought of Penelope comes closer, as if a lamp is being lit in a dim hallway. Penelope is not a warrior, and yet her strength is not less. It is the strength of endurance, the strength of staying steady under long pressure, the strength of keeping a flame alive through many nights. In the next and final quiet chapter, we will step into her house and listen to the soft labor of her waiting, the sound of her loom, the whisper of thread, and the slow turning of time toward the moment when home is fully restored. The house of Odysseus stands on Ithaca with a steady patience, like a stone that has learned how to endure sun and storm without complaint. In the daytime, light falls across its thresholds and finds dust that has drifted in slowly, grain by grain, during years of waiting. In the evening, shadows stretch into the corners and soften the outlines of familiar furniture, as if the home itself is trying to make the long absence easier to bear. The courtyard holds olive wood and dry herbs. The air carries the scent of warm stone, faint smoke, and the sea far below, breathing in its slow rhythm beyond the hills. Inside, Penelope moves through her days with a quiet discipline. She is surrounded by voices that do not truly belong to her. Men who sit in the hall and treat her home as if it is a public house. They laugh too loudly. They ask for more wine. They press their questions again and again, in tones that pretend to be polite but hold impatience underneath. Like a stone under cloth, Penelope hears them, and her face remains calm. Her hands remain composed. Her strength is not loud. It is steady, like a candle that keeps burning through drafts. Her loom stands in a place where the light is kind, and the loom's wood has been touched so many times that it has grown smooth in the places her fingers rest. Thread runs through it in long lines, pale and quiet. When Penelope works, the room fills with small sounds, the whisper of wool sliding, the soft tap of a tool, the faint creak of the frame. The rhythm is gentle. It does not hurry. It is the rhythm of someone who has learned that time can be shaped and that patience can be a craft. In the myth, Penelope makes a promise to the suitors. She says she will choose a husband when she has finished weaving a shroud for Odysseus's father, Laerte. They accept the promise because they believe time is on their side. But Penelope has her own way of holding time. In the daylight, she weaves. At night, when the hall grows quiet and the torches burn low and the suitors sleep off their wine, she returns to the loom and carefully unweaves what she has made. It is not frantic. It is careful. The thread loosens. The cloth returns to strands, and each strand is like another day kept safely in her hands. There is something almost meditative in this act, not because it is easy, but because it is repeated. Each night, her hands remember the path of thread. Each night, the room holds the small sigh of fibers releasing. Penelope's thoughts move in quiet circles. She thinks of Odysseus not as a bright legend, but as a presence she once knew in small ways, the weight of his cloak left on a chair, the sound of his steps on stone, the way his voice changed when he spoke to her alone. She thinks of Telemachus, her son, and how he has grown up with a father shaped mostly by stories. She thinks of her own heart, and how it has learned to guard itself without becoming hard. Outside the house, Ithaca continues in its ordinary ways. Shepherds lead goats along dusty paths. The bells on the animals make small, bright sounds that drift through the air and fade. Women carry water in jars, their footsteps slow and practiced. The sea is visible from certain slopes, a band of blue that changes each hour. At sunset, the rocks hold warmth, and the smell of thyme rises when a foot brushes it. At night, the sky is wide and clear, and the stars look close enough to touch, as if they have been placed there for quiet watching. Odysseus, in his disguise, moves nearer to the house like a shadow that has learned how to be patient. He listens. He watches. He lets the home's sounds reach him before he steps inside. There is the clatter of cups. There is the scrape of benches. There is the careless laughter of men who believe they own the future. There is also, beneath all that, the quiet breathing of the house itself, the way wood settles, the way a door fits its frame, the way an old hearth holds the memory of many fires. Athena's plan continues like a thread through cloth. Telemachus, the son who left as a boy and returns as a young man, comes back to Ithaca as well, guided by the same steady intelligence. His journey is not described here in loud detail. It is enough to know that he returns with a clearer spine, a firmer gaze, a sense of himself shaped by travel. When he steps onto the island, he breathes the air as if it is both familiar and new. He walks the paths, and his mind holds questions that have grown in him over years. When Telemachus meets Odysseus at Eumaeus's hut, recognition does not happen all at once. The story gives it time. The disguise holds. They speak first as strangers, and there is a tenderness in that strangeness, because it allows the son to show his nature before the father reveals his own. Then Athena lifts the veil. Odysseus stands before his son as himself, and the moment is not a shout. It is a quiet shock, like stepping from shade into sunlight. Telemachus's breath catches. His eyes fill. Odysseus holds him, and the embrace is not dramatic. It is steady, as if both of them are making sure the other is real. They speak in low voices about what must be done. The suitors are many. The household is strained. The old order has been pushed out of shape, and yet the plan is not made of wild fury. It is made of calm steps. It is made of patience. It is made of knowing when to act and when to wait. In the quiet of the hut, they decide how to enter the house, how to test loyalty, how to protect those who have remained true. Even their plotting feels like a domestic task, like mending a roof before the rains, like setting a broken hinge back into place. Odysseus returns to his home as a beggar, and the hall that once belonged to him receives him with cruelty from those who do not recognize what stands before them. The suitors throw words that are sharp, but words pass through the air and vanish. While truth remains, some servants look away, some watch quietly. The loyal ones feel something in their bones, a sense that the air itself has changed. Odysseus endures the insults with a stillness that is almost serene. because he is no longer wandering. He is on the threshold of ending what must be ended. Penelope watches from a distance, her face composed, her heart guarded. The years have taught her caution. If hope rises too quickly, it can turn into pain. She has heard false stories before. She has seen men claim things they cannot prove. She has learned to keep her voice calm, yet something in this stranger disturbs the pattern of her day. It is not his clothes. It is not his posture. It is something smaller, like a scent that stirs an old memory, like a rhythm in speech that fits a place in the mind. The story gives us moments of recognition, like a series of soft knocks on a door. The old nurse, Eurycleia, washes the beggar's feet as a servant might, and in the lamplight her hands touch a scar, one made long ago in youth. Her fingers pause, her breath changes, the lamp flame trembles. She knows. Odysseus hushes her with a look, because the time is not yet ready. Even in that hush, there is gentleness, a respect for the delicate order of the plan. The nurse's eyes fill with tears, but she does not cry out. She holds the truth quietly, like water held in cupped hands. Then comes the moment the myth has been walking toward, the restoration of the household's balance. It happens with firmness, and it happens with inevitability, as if the world itself has decided the disorder cannot continue. The details in old poems are sharp, but here we let them soften. We let the sense of justice be present without turning it into noise. The suitors are removed from the hall. The house is cleansed. The air changes. It is as if a long-held breath is finally released. Silence returns, and in that silence, there is relief. Afterward, there is work, because peace is not only a feeling, it is also the careful putting back of what was scattered. Doors are closed properly, benches are set in place, floors are swept, water is carried, herbs are burned, so their smoke can carry away the stale smell of strangers. Fresh cloth is hung, a new fire is laid in the hearth, and the flame rises clean and steady. The household moves like a body, recovering. Slow at first, then more certain. Even the light seems different, softer, warmer, as if the rooms are finally allowed to be themselves again. Penelope still does not give herself away to hope too quickly. This is one of the most tender truths of her story. Love, after long absence, can feel like a stranger too. She tests the man who claims to be her husband, not with cruelty, but with the cautious intelligence of someone who has survived. She speaks of the marriage bed, the one Odysseus built around the rooted olive tree, the bed that cannot be moved. She suggests that it be carried out of the chamber, as if it is just furniture that can be shifted and rearranged. Odysseus answers, and in his answer the old life returns. He describes the bed as only he can describe it, the living tree at its heart, the roots deep in the ground, the craftsmanship that turned the trunk into a post. The way the room was built around it, his voice is steady, and it holds not only knowledge, but intimacy, the kind of knowledge that is made of shared years and small secrets. Penelope hears the truth in the details, and her guardedness loosens. The years fall away from her shoulders in a slow release, as if thread has finally been untied. There is no need for grand speeches. In the quiet of the room, They speak in small phrases, the way people speak when they have waited too long. They tell each other what the years were like, not in a full recounting, but in fragments. A storm, a rumor, a long night, a child growing, a grief carried, a hope kept alive by stubborn thread. Outside, the house settles into its restored rhythm. Servants move softly. Lamps burn low. The night air comes in through a crack in the door, cool and clean. Odysseus visits his father, Laerte, in the orchards, and the meeting is gentle, shaped by age and time. The old man's hands are rough with earth. The trees are quiet witnesses. The air smells of fruit and leaves. There is a moment of doubt, then recognition, then a quiet embrace. A family line, stretched almost to breaking, draws itself together again. And on the island, the order of things begins to feel natural once more, as if the land itself has been waiting for the right feet to walk its paths again. In the end, the Odyssey is not only a tale of distance and danger, it is also a story about returning to the ordinary. It is about bread on a table. It is about a hearth that burns steadily. It is about a bed that cannot be moved, rooted into the living wood of an olive tree. It is about a woman who keeps time with thread, and a man who keeps his name through wandering, and a son who grows into his own strength. It is about patience and the quiet courage of enduring. In the days that follow, the island's sounds become smaller, and that smallness is a kind of healing. At dawn, the first light touches the olive leaves and makes them shine with a silvery green. As if each leaf holds a tiny mirror, the air is cool, and it carries the scent of damp earth that has rested all night. Somewhere beyond the house, a dog barks once and then quiets, as if remembering that the world no longer needs to be guarded so sharply. In the courtyard, a servant pours water over a stone basin, and the sound is a thin stream, steady and clear, a sound that belongs to peace. Penelope returns to her loom, not because she must deceive anymore, but because weaving has become part of how her hands understand calm. The thread runs between her fingers, and she feels its gentle tension, the way it yields and holds at the same time. Each pass of the shuttle is like a slow breath. She does not need to unravel in the night now, and that change is almost strange. The first evening she sleeps without the secret labor. Her body wakes once, startled by the absence of that familiar duty. Then she settles again, and the settling feels like a small mercy. Odysseus, too, learns the shape of rest again. The first nights in his own bed feel unreal, as if he is a guest in a room that once belonged to him. He listens to the house at night, to the small creaks of wood, to the faint hiss of the dying fire, to the wind sliding along the roof. These sounds are simple, and yet they carry more comfort than any song of distant islands, because they are the sounds that were missing. Sometimes he wakes before dawn and lies still, feeling the rooted steadiness of the bed beneath him, and he lets himself believe, slowly, that the ground will not vanish. Telemachus moves through the household with a quieter confidence now. He speaks with the servants, and his voice is firm but not harsh. He learns what was damaged and what must be repaired. He walks the boundaries of the fields, and sees where walls need mending. He checks stores of grain and oil. These tasks are not heroic in the way bards like to sing, but they are the true fabric of home. On Ithaca, strength is not only in battles, it is in keeping the roof sound, the animals fed, the jars sealed, the doors latched against winter winds. There are also the small human moments that return like birds coming back to a familiar tree. Penelope sits with her son and watches him talk, noticing how travel has changed the set of his shoulders, how his gaze holds more steadiness. Odysseus watches them together and feels something soften inside his chest, a tightness he did not realize he carried. He thinks of all the nights on the sea when he imagined this scene and could not be sure it would ever happen. Now it happens quietly, without music, without ceremony, just a family speaking in the light of an ordinary day. One afternoon, Penelope walks to the threshold and looks out toward the sea. The water is blue and flat in the distance, and sunlight lays a bright path across it. She remembers the years when that sea felt like an enemy, a wide mouth that swallowed ships and returned only rumors. Now, looking at it, she feels it as part of the world again. Not a threat, simply a living thing that breathes and changes. A breeze lifts the edge of her veil. She smells salt and wild herbs and warm stone. She stands there for a long moment, letting the simple view settle her thoughts. Odysseus joins air, and they do not need to speak much. They have spoken enough for now. Their presence beside each other is the language. It is the quiet understanding that the long road is done. In Greek myth, the gods move the pieces of lives like hands moving stones on a board. But the tenderness here is human. It is the way two people share silence. It is the way a hand rests near another hand without grasping, simply being there. The sun moves, the shadows shift, and the day continues in its gentle, steady motion. Even Laertes, in the orchards, begins to stand a little straighter. He tastes fruit from a branch and feels the sweetness on his tongue. He listens to the wind in the trees. His age is still there, his weariness still present, but a certain weight lifts, the weight of not knowing. Knowledge is not always pleasant, but it is steadier than uncertainty. The orchard becomes a place of slow peace, and the trees, with their patient seasons, remind everyone that time can heal when it is allowed to move without constant fear. And so the island settles. The hall that once rang with careless voices becomes quieter. Meals become simpler. Wine is poured with moderation. Laughter returns, softer, belonging to the household rather than to strangers. At night, the torches burn low, and the smoke rises straight, and the stars above Ithaca seem less like watchers and more like distant, indifferent lights, safe in their remoteness. The sea continues its slow breathing beyond the hills, and its sound, faint and steady, begins to feel again like the background of life, not the edge of loss. If you notice your own breathing as you listen, you may find it slowing without effort, the way it slows when the mind is no longer running ahead. The story has done its work quietly. It has carried you across water and back to land. It has guided you through long waiting and gentle recognition. It has shown how patience can be a kind of strength, and how home can be rebuilt not in a single moment, but in many small acts of care And now, as the house on Ithaca rests under a calm sky, as the sea beyond it continues its slow breathing, you can let the story settle like a warm cloth over the mind. The waves are far away, softened by distance. The lamps are low. The last footsteps fade into stillness. The loom is quiet. The hearth is steady. The island holds its silence like a promise kept. Good night.